Hello, it's Jim Hutchins for the Jerusalem Connection Truth Report for this week. This week I want to quote an article from Jan Markell. Jan is a Jewish believer, a woman who has had a pro-Israel ministry for years. And she has an article that she's entitled, "Interest in Israel is Waning. Does anybody care?" And then she goes on to say, in recent weeks, several publications have put out alarming stories that evangelical support for Israel is sinking, especially among young people, millennials. The periodicals state that the new survey reveals that there is a confusion about or indifference to the world's only Jewish state, Israel. It's a two-pronged phenomenon. There is a decline in the interest of the end times, that is eschatology, and a decline in interest and support for God's covenant land and people by those who identify as part of today's church. Many of them are evangelicals, many, too many. The various articles indicate that young people are focused on social justice now. Social justice. There is a perception that the Palestinians are downtrodden, persecuted, mistreated, and therefore sympathy is towards them. Israel is the, quote, occupier. So who and what is to blame? May I suggest some of the following? Pastors. Pastors rarely teach or preach on the topic, and thus it is not deemed as relevant. How can young people understand an issue if it's ignored? There are troubling theologies known as kingdom now or dominionism, amillennialism, replacement theology, Christian Palestinianism, preterism, and more. None of these will give Israel her proper biblical or end-time role. The emphasis will be on the church, not Israel. The church will be replacing Israel. Many popular teachers and leaders mislead on issues related to Israel and eschatology. Some of these include Dr. John Piper, yes, Lynn Hybels, Hank Hanegraaff, Russell Moore, Rick Warren, Rick Wiles, Jim Wallace, Tony Campolo, Shane Claiborne, Brian McLaren, and most postmodern emergent teachers. People like Andy Stanley tell people to, quote, unhitch from the Old Testament. How's that for de-emphasizing Israel's role? Most of the Word of Faith prosperity teachers and almost all of the New Apostolic Reformation promote dominion now, dominionism, which does not teach Israel's rightful role in the future. Again, these theologies place more emphasis on the church. Emphasis like Christ at the checkpoint have painted Israel as the Mideast villain and bully rather than one free society in that region, the one democratic society in that region. Prominent evangelicals and social justice promoters such as Lynn Hybels speak at this event. So do Tony Campolo, Gary Burge from Wheaton College, Jim Wallace, Hank Hanegraaff, Shane Claiborne, and others who attract young followers. Christianity Today, the magazine, says that at best young evangelicals are, quote, indifferent about Israel. With its nonstop barrage of anti-Israel propaganda, how can young minds sort through the fiction and to find the facts? While people, both young and old, can be disloyal and change sides, God says this in Psalm 121, he that keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleep. God's love and protection, I should say, will never waver for his covenant land and people. And the old cliche, the old poem, how odd of God to choose the Jews, but not as odd as those who choose the Jewish God, but spurn the Jews. God says this in 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 5. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. Avoid such people. And so I say to you, are we in the last days? I'm convinced you better believe it. And that's the truth.